This podcast has been very kindly sponsored by JumpCloud for MSPs.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Tate Talks. Glad you could join us. Today we had a great chat with Dor Eisner, CEO of Guardz. Really hope you enjoy. Hi, how are you doing? Thanks so much for joining us today for Tate Talks.
Thank you very much for having me, Chris. Appreciate the time.
No, looking forward to learning a little bit more about you, what you're up to in the MSP space these days. But before we get going, as is customary, the very first question I ask on these things is maybe just introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Cool. So I'm Dor, doing cybersecurity for the last 25 years. I was a commander in the Israeli intelligence force way before cybersecurity became a category. And that's what I'm doing in the last 2 decades. The first decade I worked for the government for a few projects doing cybersecurity. And in the last decade I'm doing startups in cybersecurity. Started with IoT security startup that was a bit before the time, and then moved to a threat intelligence startup that was right at the time and was acquired by Rapid7 about 4.5 years ago. And then we started Guardz about 3.5 years ago with a mission and a vision to empower MSPs to secure their clients in a better way.
Awesome. Well, we'll talk about Guardz as we go along. 'Cause I'm kind of curious to know a little bit more about it. It's a name that I see a lot, but I have to confess I'm not an expert, so I'm looking forward to that. But 25 years in cybersecurity, that's pretty impressive. I guess you've seen lots of changes in cybersecurity in that time.
Wow, the market changed, and it's changing, in the last 2 years, the market even changed in a much faster pace than, in the last 20 years. So, but the category is changing, and also the threat landscape is changing. And what we see in the last 2 years is that the bad guys, the cyber criminals, are leveraging AI more than the good guys, more than the defenders. And we started to see, in the last years, attack as a service tools like, fraud tool as a service, account compromise tool as a service, ransomware tool as a service, you name it. We started to see those tools being offered in the dark web and in different forums across different channels at a massive scale. And this transformation of AI that is happening, worldwide, across the board, is actually empowering the bad guys to generate cybercrime at scale. And this is happening in a very interesting moment in the inflection point of AI, because also the businesses are trying to adopt AI. And this is kind of, the future of, the defenders against the threat actors, who is going to be better in, leveraging and getting, the power of AI in his hands.
Well, yeah, and we're talking before we started the podcast, and I think a lot of people listening know this, but I was at Datto prior to joining JumpCloud. And even then, I'm trying to think what year it was, but we were talking about ransomware as a service, which was kind of it was a thing, but I think it was very, very primitive compared to what it is now, and those sort of malware as a service. So that's moved on massively. And I'm curious, you mentioned about the bad guys sort of leveraging AI probably better than the regular businesses. And what we're seeing quite a lot is as a risk. You mentioned the sort of risk profiles is around shadow AI, well, shadow IT in general, but shadow AI in that a lot of organizations or people, users know that they need to use AI. They've been told to use AI. It can help them with their productivity. But a lot of the time they're going away and just finding their own AI tool and firing all kinds of data into it that no one knows where it's going. So we're seeing quite a lot of work now on sort of AI governance to say, AI is great. You should be leveraging it, but make sure you're using the right AIs and you've got the right guardrails and the right tools in place to make sure that you're not just sort of leaking corporate data out of the back door.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you mentioned this career history you went through there, which was really interesting, up to Guardz, and Guardz is very MSP focused. What kind of initially got you into the MSP community?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. I'm doing cybersecurity for so many years, And after we sold the previous business to Rapid7, one day my father is calling me and he's running a very small law firm of, like 5 employees law firm, and his business was breached. And I didn't think that, cyber criminals back in the days, I didn't think that cyber criminals are going, after such small businesses, like in this area. And that was epiphany moment when I asked, him, who is your IT provider, so who is your IT consultant, let's say MSP, and he was telling me, I know him, but we didn't even talk about cybersecurity. We never talked about cybersecurity. We talked about, like all things IT related, but we didn't talk about cybersecurity up until this breach. And that was, a moment in time that I said, listen, I need to talk with these guys and I need to talk with, dozens of other MSPs that are serving small businesses and understand what the MSP community is doing for cybersecurity for small businesses. And 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, when I started, Guardz, there was, very few MSPs that really understand, cybersecurity deployment, monitoring, provision, detection and response in a way that is effective. It was highly fragmented point solutions that we discovered that being deployed without the governance, without the monitoring, without the understanding what the power of the tools and how to connect the dots across the different tools. And that was, the inception of Guards. We realized that the fragmentation of the tools is not going to move from the world, but we can come as a layer that help MSPs to connect the dots and to streamline security operations in a better way. And that's why we started Guard.
Well, that does bring us up to date. But again, very interesting point you made there that the MSP community has changed dramatically. I often talk on this podcast in that when I used to run an MSP business before going into vendor land, our cybersecurity would look like this is years and years ago, but it would probably be an antivirus product. We'll probably use Sophos or something, and then a firewall, and we may use WatchGuard or Cisco or whatever. And that was pretty much it. That was almost the if you said what's your cybersecurity stack look like? Well, we probably wouldn't have even used that term then. But what does your stack look like? It would have been probably Microsoft Office, small business server, and Sophos, and that's pretty much and maybe Symantec backup exec or something. And that's all people needed. But things have changed so much in that time that MSPs have had to continually change and adapt to as they've gone along.
Yeah, it's pretty clear that the threat landscape changed. We talked about that, but it's also about how cybersecurity is being delivered is changed dramatically in the last few years, and we believe that even the attack vector changed dramatically from the endpoint to the identity into the cloud. And this shift of the threat landscape and the attack vector is actually pushing the MSP community to adapt different solutions and different approach to protect their clients.
Massively, massively, and that's where Guards comes in, I guess. So this is a great opportunity to explain to people probably like me and those listening like me that have heard the name, probably seen your website and been to events. But tell us a little bit about Guards and the problem that you're trying to solve for MSPs.
So as I said, we are trying to solve the fragmentation of the tools by building a unified and AI native security platform that connect the dots across identities, emails, devices, data, awareness, and everything in between into one normalized data fabric. This is the platform that we've built. We've built it with tier one security controls like Sentinel-1 built in as an EDR, Avalanche Checkpoint email security built in as an email security, identity threat detection response. All the best security controls are tapped into Guards natively. And on top of that, we have a normalized data fabric that connect the dots And on top of that, we are providing a full unified MDR 24 by 7 to detect threats and to remediate threats in the speed of AI. And this is a transformation for the market, because you as an MSP, you don't need to get 5, 6, 7, 8 different point solutions and try to understand how to deploy them, how to configure them, how to monitor them, and how to get the most out of these tools. You can get the Guardz platform, deploy it in a single click of a button across all of your tenants. It's a multi-tenant platform by design that is built purely for MSPs. And then you get, like all the security controls connected together, and also all the detection and response streamlined into your clients in an automated way.
Well, it's a very high level overview and I appreciate that. What I'll do is if people want to know more information, I'll put all those notes into the description of the episode so people can maybe go to the website and have a look, set up a demo and try it for themselves. I guess that's the best way to get going, right?
That's the best way to get it, and we also believe in transparency. So we are a self-serve sign-up platform. So you can go to the Guardz website, guards.com, and just like start your free trial, deploy the platform for 1, 2, 3 clients, and see the power of the detection and response in a unified platform.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, hopefully, some people take you up on that, and I look forward to learning more about it myself. I'll have a dive in and have a look.
Sure.
Just changing gears slightly, you mentioned how you ended up in the MSP space, which is fascinating actually. How you kind of got in there after seeing maybe a need that MSPs or whatever they were called at that time probably weren't reacting correctly to the needs of their clients on the cybersecurity front. So it's clear that you speak to lots of MSPs through Guardz and through conversations you have outside of there. When you're chatting to them about their challenges in 2026, what are sort of common threads that you're hearing from them?
Yeah, so we are hearing a lot of, the threats coming around identity threats and coming after the cloud directory environments, the Microsoft 365, the Google Workspace. We are hearing a lot of, frustration from, from the all the SOC as a service kind of tools or services out there, that it's a black box, that you pay for something, but you don't see, the value. So this is also something. And we hear a lot about, the challenges of operational efficiency in the MSP business, because, like as an MSP, you need to provide the best IT support, you need to provide the best security operations, but you also need to show the value and bring the value every other day. And to show the value and to bring the value to your clients, it's not just about when an incident happens. It's also, like on a weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. And MSPs are suffering from, from the point solutions that are out there, and how to collect the data and show the data to the clients in a beautiful reports, or, like streamlined, like data points. And this is also something that we are tackling in the Guardz platform, is that we are helping MSPs, to generate all this data, in the click of a button from the platform, and share, this, operational efficiency and operational excellence with their clients. And I think those are the main challenges that we see, like the tool sprawl, the operational efficiency, obviously the head count that they need to grow in order to support this trajectory, and also the AI transformation. It's happening so fast, but the tools that are there are not ready for this transformation. So in order to let AI do the work for you as an MSP, you need to actually bring the right data foundations, and you need to bring the right structure in order for AI to do something for you. And if you don't have this organized and structured data, AI just do more damage than magic.
Yeah, definitely more damage than magic. And tool sprawl and efficiency is something that we speak about a lot at Jump Cloud. So that was interesting. But one thing that occurred to me as you were talking then is you mentioned the kind of law firm story that your dad mentioned earlier. If that MSP, and I'm trying to just flip this on its head slightly, because as a vendor like Jump Cloud and previously at Datto and you at Guardz, we're probably very good at talking about cybersecurity to MSPs in terms of MSPs know that they need to do this now, and we're very good at that. How easy do you think it is, or is it getting easier, or are MSPs getting better at having that conversation with that small law firm? I mean, how would you recommend, an MSP is going to a law firm, an MSP is going to a law firm, they look after their IT, keep the printers working, that kind of thing. And then they can have a conversation and say, Mr. Client, we think you need to invest in this product because of this. They don't want to be selling on fear. I think a lot of time MSPs aren't great at selling anyway. Secondly, they probably don't want to be fear mongering and trying to say, you need to buy this or this, the world's going to end, this kind of thing. So, I mean, how are you thinking, or how are MSPs at pitching the product to their ultimate clients and prospects?
It's a great question. I think it's about showing the data and showing the risk. This is like the foundations of of selling cybersecurity. Not about the fear. Showing what is the potential risk. Showing it's not just if you are backed with the right data. For example, I can tell you something that we added to the platform that a lot of MSPs ask for us. Like give me an option to generate a report about the external risk of the business. Okay, so we have this in the platform today. In a click of a button, you can go, you can put the domain of the business, and you get a beautiful report about all the vulnerable operation system, the open ports, the SSL certificate that is missing, the DMARC that is missing, all those kind of things. And this is like to a new prospect, this is a power, show the data. Come with an evidence about the exposure of the business. This is one. Then after you run the business, you run with the client for some time, show the value over time. Show how many detections you saw and how many remediations you act on. Show like what is the risk over time. Who are the riskiest users in the organization? What are you doing as an MSP, to mitigate this risk? What are the controls that you put in place? I think that when you come to a business conversation about, the risk or the exposure and the actions that you take in order to minimize this risk or to mitigate, the potential attack, this is where the conversation becomes like a strategic conversation. And this is how you sell cybersecurity these days and in the future.
Yeah, certainly on the reporting thing, it's been a long time tale with an MSPs that the more successful you are, ultimately you can be less visible to your clients, and they're kind of, what are we paying you for? But then if you can say, you can show the reports, well, this is what you're paying us for. It makes it a lot easier.
Exactly.
Okay, well, let's move on to the next section, which talks a little bit about you personally, then, Dor, in what you do when you're maybe not working hard at Guardz. What do you do to switch off? Are you a podcast listener? Obviously, Tate Talks. I say that to everyone, although I'm sure that is the case. Are you a Netflix guy or a sports person? What do you do to switch off in your downtime?
Yeah, I'm a sport person. Sport is my mental, healthcare. I love doing kite surfing. Kite surfing is my number one hobby. And kite surfing is a little bit of, like running a business for me because you need to control and you need to balance few different things, the position on the board, the position of the kite, the wind direction, the waves. You need to balance few different things at the same time. And it's like running a business, for me. So I enjoy running a business and I enjoy doing kite surfing, and it's kind of, helping me to stay sharp. Doing a lot of sport, spending a lot of time with the family, traveling, and enjoy talking with, peers and in the community. So it's also I'm doing it a lot, jumping on podcast, and that's also part of, of the journey.
Well, I've just added kite surfing to my ever-going list of MSP hobbies. So I think you're definitely the first one because as you were talking, I was jotting down some that I've had recently: racing, driver, backgammon playing, gardening, music, all kinds of different hobbies. And I'm pretty sure you're the first kite surfer that I've had on. So thanks for that. I'm sure it seems when I've never tried it. It looks like I don't know if I'd ever come out of it in one piece. It looks quite fast and dangerous to me, but I'm sure you're better at it than
It,
probably not as dangerous when you know what you're doing.
it's a bit extreme, but it's like, like racing cars, like it's extreme, but if you know what you're doing and you take the right measures, like, so it's pretty safe.
And do you get to do that often? Are you in a sort of a location where you can do that?
Yeah, exactly. I prefer to live in locations where, where there is like, the right spot.
Okay. Well, do you do any surfing? We were talking about a mutual friend of ours, Antoine, earlier. I think he does some surfing. So I can see a picture behind you with some waves. That's why I'm
Yeah,
thinking maybe some surfing involved.
yeah. Absolutely.
Cool. Okay. Well, that was fantastic talking to you, Dor. I really, really appreciate the time. But before we go, I always ask one question to every guest, which is a fairly straightforward one. But if you were chatting to an MSP at an event, a trade show, I know you guys do lots of them, and they came up to us and said, Dor, our businesses, our MSP has kind of hit a wall, or we're struggling a little, or we want to expand, take it to that next level. What could we do in the back half of 2026 to make that happen? What sort of tip would you give them?
Great question. So I think, the one thing that I will say is capitalize on the AI transformation and capitalize on the cybersecurity demand and compliance regulation that is coming from the S&P market. I think, and if you combine those two things, if you can, get the AI to work for your MSP business while you are growing your business around cybersecurity, I think these are the main drivers that will help MSPs, to do better business and grow.
Yeah, no, I think they're fantastic tips. And as I mentioned earlier on, I'll put all of your contact details in below. How people connect you on LinkedIn and at the Guardz website, and hopefully people can follow the conversation. But some great tips there. Really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us on Tate Talks, and I hopefully see you again soon.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you for having me.
Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks, Dor, for taking the time to join us today. Really hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I certainly did, and I'll see you soon for the season finale of Tate Talks, Season 12.
This podcast has been very kindly sponsored by JumpCloud for MSPs. JumpCloud for MSPs provides managed service providers a platform for delivering modern IT services that are identity-centric, cloud-native, and vendor-agnostic. Using JumpCloud's Open Directory platform, MSPs can iteratively replace point solutions by unifying device, identity, and access management. To learn more, please visit jumpcloud.com/MSP or email the team at partners@jumpcloud.com.